I would like to kind of pick your brain about this policy because I had on a previous episode I did have Steve Sullivan on who we talked about the potential of a book banning or whatever this policy, whatever you want to call it. I functionally call it a book ban, but
Yeah.
let's dive into that policy a little bit because maybe some people didn't see that episode, but and I know you spoke up about it yesterday, which you got I mean, Youth for Unity. If you guys aren't aware, it has been organizing protests and different types of events for the last 2 years. So if you're in Bucks County, you probably have seen something that they've done. So tell me a little bit about this policy and how it affects kids in Central Bucks now.
Right. So the policy that the board decided on last night was policy 109.2. And there's been a lot of controversy around it because um, basically there was no policy before in Central Bucks about how books kind of came to be in the library. And there were a few concerned parents who wanted to set up a structure where librarians and like the board could kind of process all of these books that were coming through. And that was totally reasonable. And I think that all 9 members of the board kind of agreed unanimously that there should be some kind of system to make sure that there wasn't any inappropriate content being released to children. But the issue is that between this one board meeting where this policy was brought up and then the next board meeting, the policy completely changed. And then the bigger problem is nobody knows how it got changed. So that was a really big topic at the board meeting last night is literally no one knows who rewrote the policy to become something that kind of had language that would exclude books on gender nonconforming or queer or trans students in the district. The language in this policy basically said, we're going to remove any books that contain anything that Dr. Luca Ball considers inappropriate. But
And
what is inappropriate?
that's the superintendent, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Just want to put that out there for people that might not know. But go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. Yeah, so there were a lot of issues brought up with the policy. No one knew who rewrote it. No one kind of had a definition for what was deemed inappropriate because what some parents were saying was, oh, nudity would be considered inappropriate under the ban. Well, that's fair and all, but what defines nudity? Like, is someone saying he took his shirt off? Is that considered nudity or too graphic for a child to read? The third problem was that there was no idea on who would be reviewing these books. I mean, hundreds of books are coming into the school district every single year, and there's no way that anyone can go through and read all of them to make sure they're appropriate. But in policy 109.2, it basically said that someone designated by Superintendent Dr. Luca Ball would be reviewing them, or that Dr. Luca Ball himself would be reviewing them.
It's
Now,
a
I've
lot
never
of
been a
reading.
superintendent, but I do not think that Dr. Luca Ball has enough time to read that many books and make sure they're all appropriate. And something that Dr. Mahmood, who is another member of the school board, brought up is that it would be great to have a committee reviewing these books. So, like a committee including teachers, concerned parents, concerned students, all of the stakeholders should really be involved in this conversation. And the more conservative members of the board were like, oh no, it's fine. Like, we'll just pass it and deal with like the logistics after. So it was just really disappointing to see all of these flaws with the policy and have the conservative members kind of rush to a vote on it last night.
Yeah, and it's like you kind of said, it makes sense to say, yeah, there should be some form of review for something that might go into a school library, but when it's specifically like you said, nudity. I'll use the example. So I'm friends with the two guys. So I listened to the interview today. Cyril Mikaleko, who has been on my previous version of the show. He is a reporter, Bucks County Beacon, editor-in-chief, I believe. And then
Yeah.
Kevin Maloney, I think it's Maloney, might be Mahoney, but Maloney, I think, from Raging Chicken Press. They talked about the book Mouse that like it has we all know was in the news for being like banned certain places. Not for hinting or talking about Nazi ideology, but because there was a naked mouse this has happened according this is what they were talking about. So this implied nudity of a mouse being naked is what they used as justification for banning a book. So
Yeah.
when we talk about like the stretches of imagination here, we're not talking about like, oh, any implication of gender is out of the question, because we know that that's what these folks are targeting. We know that targeting quote critical race theory is the goal of these types of book bans and targeted policies to get rid of, as you said, LGBTQ plus stories, stories about people of color as protagonists, because God forbid we have those in the school district. And when I was in school, we read King Leopold's Ghost, and I've brought that up a few times in like previous interviews. Under something like this, when you're talking about King Leopold's Ghost, which is talking about the trades, and that's a very loose term, in the Congo and the colonization, you know, you're talking about rape, you're talking about murder and genocide. Those things wouldn't fly under some sort of policy like this. So something that is vital to our history, vital to world history, understanding let's not make these same mistakes and learn from what has happened, will be unacceptable. So let's just dive, I guess. I have some things in chat I'm gonna read, because Jordan always is plugged in. I don't know if you guys have ever talked to each other, but Jordan said that they are only allowed to remove a book if a parent challenges them. They are not actively removing books yet, and that's the key word, is yet. So go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off, but if you had some...
So the issue with that is, previously, if a parent disagreed with a book that a student was reading, they could just reach out to the teacher and be like, hey, I don't approve of my child reading this book. Like, can you assign them another book to read? And that's totally fine. Like, of course, parents kind of have oversight on what kind of information they want their child to digest. But this new policy basically allows that one parent to make a decision for all 18,000 students across the district. And that's ridiculous, because maybe my mom doesn't agree with me reading something, but my mom should not be responsible for what other children across the district are reading.
And it's I have a video of Dr. Delangelo, again, a friend of mine, and it's funny because I get to talk about all my friends tonight, unfortunately. But she stood up at the meeting last night. We're gonna watch. I'm gonna, after we finish with our interview, I'm gonna play the video of her vocalizing. If you had a problem with a book, tell the teacher. That is the policy, right? And then, frankly, I'll say it because some people might not feel comfortable saying, and I'm not saying you, Sarah, but some folks that might not be so comfortable in bringing it up is saying that, look, sometimes parents can be wrong, and sometimes letting a kid read something that they identify with makes them feel more comfortable in their skin. And yes, there are times and places where something might be inappropriate. There are times and places where stories get blown way out of proportion and say, oh, there's this one copy of this book in the school district. And it's like, well, yeah, it's in the high school, not in like the kindergarten library.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference, and context matters. So
absolutely.
It's so silly. It's just so silly. But do you have anything to add about the policy otherwise that we haven't hit on, that or maybe the response, or maybe just leading up to it, like how it's been covered, anything like that? Because I'm going to talk to you about like how we can kind of move forward here in a second, but I just didn't want to cut you off beforehand.
Well, we'll talk about this more later, I'm sure, but I'm irritated by the lack of conversation the board is having with students, which is what I wrote my op-ed about, because I feel like a lot of students just don't know about what decisions the board is making that impact them so much. And As they also discussed at the meeting last night, the president of the board and the superintendent did send out a letter to the community regarding the book ban, which they decided not to call it a book ban, even though it is. And I think that's the kind of things that need to be shared with students too, because there are a lot of us that care about this issue. We just sometimes don't know that it's going on.
Yeah, and then it falls upon someone like what we're doing here, and then it's like getting that
Right.
message out. And look, I'm happy to spread the message, but the problem is that the message is almost too late.
Yeah.
I've had young activists as young as 13 and 14 on the show in a previous episode of this show. I've had different activists from Steve Sullivan, who his wife is on the school board. We've had these people on, and it's like we can only amplify it so much, whereas they're supposed to be getting it to people. They're supposed to be hand delivering these policies and saying, like, this is what we're trying to do. I will provide a prescription on what we can do to the school board problem, and that is vote, volunteer, donate, run.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like any of those things, run for the school board. If you're tired of your school board director acting a fool and frankly ruining my alma mater and your alma maters. Look, I went to Groveland, Tohickon, and to CBUS. I don't know if you went to elementary school all the way through, but I'm tired of hearing about my old schools in the news. Like I want to just be like, hey, my brother's on the football team. Like I just want to go and like celebrate, like, hey, I'm from West. We have a good football team, or like have these things where it's like, yeah, I'm in the same boat. We moved here from New Jersey for the school districts,
Right.
and I just bought a house, and it's like, this is my taxpayer money. Which, do you know? I might even just wait on it. The $15,000 that is gonna be spent on not covering up, but on PR around these decisions. It's mind-boggling the tax dollars that are being wasted and the time that's being wasted by a small extremist minority in our community. And please don't take what I'm saying as just vote. Not just voting is not enough. Vote, volunteer, donate, run. If you have to do one of those things, please, you have to. You have to vote. The rest of the stuff you have to choose what you can do. Let's move because I'm going to blow a gasket here. Let's move to your op-ed. Let's talk about the how do you think the best way that we can continue to amplify a message to students so that way we can get students involved? Because I'm kind of in the same boat where, like, I'm frustrated that young people don't know about these things, but I'm also frustrated that young people aren't kind of going out and like saying like, this is wrong and blah blah blah. Like you said, you're one of two alumni, like young alumni there yesterday. I had two other meetings, frankly, so I couldn't stay, but and only two students, right, that spoke out, you said?
Yeah. And there were other students there, for sure, which was amazing to see, and a lot of community support. But the students are ultimately the ones that are impacted most by this decision. Like, this ban on books is going to hurt our college preparedness, our futures, our ability to communicate and learn and grow and talk to other communities. And I think it's ridiculous that Central Bucks isn't offering this opportunity for students to be weighing in on the board's decisions. Because if you brought this policy up to a group of students, I'm sure most of them would be like, this is unacceptable. Like, we can't pass a policy that is so broad and has such a negative removal of identities that have been erased in the past. So I think that amplifying the message with students is absolutely crucial, but students also kind of, I think, struggle to get the motivation to lead when first they aren't sure how to, And secondly, they just aren't provided the resources to do so.
Hmm.
And third, we just struggle with the motivation to lead when we feel like we aren't being given a seat at the table. And activism and community organizing is so mentally and emotionally draining and exhausting. And I'm sure you know that too, because sometimes it feels like you're just screaming into the void and literally nobody cares about what you're saying. So I think it's so difficult for young people to feel motivated to take action on these things when it literally seems like nobody is listening.
Yes, and trust me, I feel that all the time.
Mhm.
Look, all right, here's my like plea to anybody that's seeing this, watching, listening. Sarah, how old are you? 19?
I'm 19.
I'm 26. Ashley, she's 31. No,
Mhm.
no, she's yes. And Malcolm Kenyatta, who's again, we're talking back to back to back episodes here. He's in his early 30s. We have
Mhm.
people, you have friends, you have community, you have people that you can reach out to that have done it, are doing it, learning how to do it, and it's scary. Yes, when I ran to become the chair of the Doylestown Democrats in 2020 as a 23-year-old, or when I ran in 2019 to run for supervisor, yeah, no one took me seriously. And I lost by 38 votes. 38 votes. In Doylestown Township's never been controlled by Democrats in the entire 100 and plus year history of Doylestown.
Yeah.
You can be that person, whether it's organizing or just showing up to go knock some doors or phone bank, which you can do with Sarah,
Mhm.
or running. Like all of this
Right.
stuff is so, so vital. Um, and if you're afraid to speak out, there are people that are going to support you, and I think that's something that we have to emphasize a lot more of.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
is there anything that you want to highlight beyond what was like you had written like in your piece, or that we haven't hit on about like how we can move forward? Because look, I said it with David about the Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority.
Mhm.
We're fighting for reproductive rights. We're fighting to protect same-sex marriage. We're fighting to protect our public utilities, and we're
Right.
trying to protect our freedom of speech. And it feels like the world is almost like imploding, but we
Mhm.
have to keep going. So is there anything that like you specifically want people to know, like, hey, you should do other than volunteer for these campaigns? Because we're on that, but anything that you want to highlight beyond just like what we've already hit on.
I think people who are over their 30s need to stop underestimating the power of young people, especially when it comes to these progressive democratic movements. I think the statistic is like 60% of people aged 18 to 29 voted for Biden. Like most of us are Democrats, and
Yep.
we understand that there are progressive policies that we need to actually have a future. We're going to be the ones most impacted by climate change. We're struggling from student loans. Rent is so high that most of us can't afford to buy a home anywhere. We're facing inflation. We're just facing so many crises. Like all of them are just coming at us. And so many of us have ideas on how to tackle this and amplify the voices of young people, and how to get progressives elected into office, and how to defeat Republican challengers. But it seems like nobody is willing to listen or take us seriously. And I am begging everyone who holds a position of power, listen to the young people around you. Because I promise a lot of us are very angry and motivated, and we were willing to put in the work when you give us the outlet to do so. For instance, working as a field organizer on this campaign, like I'm 19 years old and I have hundreds of thousands of people now to talk to. And I'm so grateful to Ashley and to our campaign manager, Hannah, for giving me this experience and trusting that I can build a program of students and volunteers to get Ashley elected into office. And we just need so many more people like that trust that we're willing to work hard. We have been working hard. Um, like college acceptance rates, they're going down. We know how to work super hard to get into things. So I just think it's really important to not underestimate how much power that young people can really have for these movements.
I think you may have just made the best like 1 minute statement I've ever had on this show that like that encapsulates everything that I've been trying to say for my entire life. I think you should be the spokesperson now. No, and I'll put one more point onto that and say, if you're a Democrat and you have a position of power, i.e., like myself as the chairman, but in municipal organizations, if you're a committee person, frankly, if you're a young person, you should run for one of those positions. Do it.
Right.
I became
Absolutely.
the chair at 23 years old, so been doing it, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, but it's not that hard. You can do it, but
Yeah.
if you're in one of these positions, county level, municipal level, state level, be willing to take a risk. Be willing
Absolutely.
to take a jump and believe in somebody that they may not have the experience. I'm putting it heavily in quotes because if you've tried to get a job in the last 10 years, an entry level position sometimes, and this is not a joke, will say you need 5 years experience. It's like, well, how the hell are we going to get that experience if an entry level position is not going to get us in the door? So I can't emphasize enough what you just said as being so vital to building. If you're a Democrat and you want to build a big party, young people are the future. Millennials, and sorry,
Right.
Sarah, you're not a millennial. Maybe you're happy you're not a millennial. I'm the youngest millennial, born in 1996. So as the youngest millennial, we are the largest single generational voting bloc right now. So
Yeah.
we have to make sure that we're fighting for Medicare for all. We're fighting for a Green New Deal to protect our environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to repeat what you just said. I'll put the policy names in there, but you listen to what Sarah said and do that. So it's very, very important that you know that you will get those speed bumps. You will hit those walls where you're like, screw this, I don't feel like doing it anymore, but you have to keep going. You have to keep going and find those positions that someone's going to give you a shot. So just be unstoppable and just keep going, and we'll build a movement that's stronger than anything before. And yes, we are going to have to fight and claw back for our reproductive rights, for our freedom of speech, for all these fundamental things that we didn't that frankly generations before us took for granted in many ways.
Absolutely.